everybody, and welcome back to more of the Labyrinth of Grisaia. In the last episode, Yuuji took out, sniped someone who had a hostage, and we successfully disarmed the hostage. Now, the rest of the team is going to swarm in and control the terrorist situation. Crap, I didn't hit the hostage, did I? I guess I did. Told him to bring a barf bag, will you? I think I'm gonna hurl. Alright. They say the bullets you fire on the battlefield will come flying right back at you someday. But for the moment, I'm still alive. Guess I'm lucky that way. In the chaotic minutes that followed, the assault by our suppression team ended up getting badly out of sync with the airport police. As the hostage sat on the ground in a daze, one of the surviving terrorists managed to grab her and make a run for the high-speed boat moored at the nearby pier. Oh no! You probably shouldn't have knocked the hostage into the sea with him. Well, I saw the whole thing, but by the time I ran over to help, the terrorist who tried to escape was already in custody, and the middle school hostage who'd fallen in the sea was thrashing around in the water. Aww.
Hey, Shorty! 見ろよ! 面白いぜ! つか、この中学生、さっきから何を叫んでるんだ?
Sounds like she can't swim.
何? どうしてそれを早く言わねえんだよ?
I think she's been screaming for a while, actually.
あ、だって俺、日本語わかんねえもんよ.
You're talking it right now. How do you not speak it? Stop poking her with the oar. Sure you don't want to help? We went through a lot of trouble saving the kid, but at this rate, she's gonna drown.
そらマジな. とりあえず、なんか日本語で声かけてやれよ、ショーティ.
Hey, you have any last words? This might be bad, Danny. If they decide that there's a child abuse, you could get court-martialed.
なに、結局は俺が助けてやったんだから問題ねえだろ.
I really doubt it works that way.
冗談じゃありませんよ.
Whoops. The young miss does indeed appear to be a bit upset. What do we do, Danny?
助けていただいたことには深く感謝をします。ですが、もう少しマシな方法もあったのではないでしょうかと。私はここに異議を申し立てるものです。返り血を浴びたり、海に突き落とされたり、助けを求めても指さしてゲラゲラ笑ってたり、必死に桟橋に近づこうとすればボートのオールで頭を小づかれたり、散々ですよ。訴え。
おい、ショーティ、さっきからこのお嬢ちゃんは何を怒ってるんだ?
Don't know. Sounds like she didn't appreciate the roughness of our rescue.
生き残っておいて文句を言うとは平和で贅沢な話だな。まあそうカッカするなよ、お嬢ちゃん。ガム食うか。日本人はガム好きだろ。
You guys like gum, right? Come on, Danny. Japanese middle schoolers don't swarm GIs for candy these days. It's not 1946 anymore, buddy. Apparently, Chizuru took exception to my 6'3" comrade patting her on the head and offering her sugarless chewing gum. She responded by pulling a wallet from her pocket and showing us the driver's license within it. Hey, Danny, take a look at this. Japanese driver's license. This lady was born in the Showa era.
Showa?
Sorry, it's a Japanese thing. It means before 1989, basically.
は? そういうことは何か？このお嬢ちゃんは24歳なのか？
Yeah, I guess she would be.
おい、冗談なんだろ？勘弁してくれよ、翔太。この子に比べりゃ今年小学校に上がった AD の姪っ子の方がまだ大人びて見えるぞ。日本人ってのは本当に幼く見えるんだな。
Well, I think this one's kind of a special case, actually.
だからこれって言いながら頭をポンポンしないでください。私は先生なんですよ。学園長なんですよ。もう許しませんよ。
Please stop yelling.
面白い。俺の実家の近所にこんな風にキャンキャン吠える犬飼ってるばあさんがいるぜ。
Good times, good times. Anyway, given the way we met, I've always had a hard time talking respectively to Chizuru. It'd be a pain to try and change that now, so I'm still not as polite as I should be.
そんな目に遭っておきながら、千鶴さんもよくあなたみたいな男を自分の学園に入学させようと思ったわよね。
Well, she had her pride as a grown-up, I guess. Said she wanted to repay us for saving her life. Woman's got some clout in academic circles, so she managed to help Danny's sister get into a Japanese university as a foreign student. But there wasn't really anything I wanted, so I tried to decline. Chizuru was damn stubborn about it, though. Told me to say anything at all. At the time, I'd never really gotten to experience an ordinary school life. So just on a whim, I told her I'd like to try being a normal student at a normal school. That's how I ended up where I am today. So she did not make good on her promise.
それでも、朝子が生きていれば、あなたも美浜に行こうだなんて思わなかったんじゃない？
Ooh, that's a thorny subject. Well, probably not. After completing my training and examinations at Narashino, I received the stamp of approval to graduate from trainee to agent, officially inheriting Asako's ID number. In no time at all, my workload increased dramatically. I imagine it has something to do with that 2,000-meter shot I landed in Vancouver, just after returning from America and obtaining auxiliary status. But as a full-fledged agent, I found myself in demand both domestically and abroad. It might be an exaggeration to say I was doing the work of 10 men, but my employer definitely kept me hopping from one job to the next. And they generally deployed me to support teams in sore need of assistance. I suppose it's only natural, but the teams in question tended to greet me with words like, "Thank you for coming," or "We're expecting a lot from you." Till this point, I hadn't experienced much in the way of trust from strangers. So these enthusiastic welcomes weighed pretty damn heavily on my shoulders, and I often pushed myself harder than necessary to avoid letting them down. Taking Asako's place, I traveled all around the world as 9029. Not 90210, unfortunately, consistently producing results 50% beyond the expectations of my client in any given situation. After a while, I began to realize that trying any harder wasn't necessary, since overly positive evaluations only made life more difficult in the long run. And around the same time, I started gaining some actual confidence in myself and my ability to succeed in this line of work. One day, I even found myself mouthing off a bit in front of my master. "You know, I think I might be a match for you by now, Asako." To me, Kusakabe Asako wasn't just a master to follow. She was a mother worthy of devotion and a father who I wanted to surpass. Every time I pulled off a difficult shot in the field, I jubilantly shouted, "How do you like that?" in my mind, and those words are always directed at Asako. Silently, I'd call out to her in celebration, "Just watch me. See how much your student's grown?" Of course, I also tried to act totally nonchalant around my teammates, as if none of this was any big challenge for Kusakabe Asako's apprentice. At the time, it made me feel pretty good about myself. Up until this point, I'd worked my ass off over and over again to produce superb results, hoping to bolster Asako's reputation by proving my effectiveness as a tool. Felt like I had earned a few words of praise by now, and yet...
なーにこの野郎、調子こきやがって。ちっと表出ろてめえ。
Asako growled at me angrily, crushed the empty beer can in her hand, then grabbed her rifle and rose to her feet. By this point, her right eye was almost entirely useless. I was handling virtually all of the work, while she enjoyed a retirement mainly occupied by drinking, eating, and sleeping. When you go 3 days without firing a rifle, it takes a week to get the feel for it again. I hadn't seen Asako take a single shot in the last 6 months. Didn't think there was any chance she could beat me, and I honestly didn't want her to fire a gun ever again. I'd take care of those jobs for her from now on. I wanted the rest of her life to be peaceful.
よし、そこまで言うなら相手になってやる。勝負だ。
You sure about this? You're obviously drunk.
酔ってる時にだって敵は来るさ。この程度で撃てなくなるやつが生き残ってるわけねえだろ。
You can't use your right eye anymore, can you?
右が見えなきゃ左で見るだけのことだ。お前みたいな尻に殻くっつけたひよこ野郎相手にゃちょうどいいハンデだ。
Now you're just being ridiculous. The nature of our duel was simple. Asako would drop an empty beer can into a nearby river, and we'd let it float along for 10 minutes. After that, the first person to land a shot on it would be the winner. The rules were easy enough, but the game itself was genuinely challenging. After 10 minutes floating downstream, the can would travel far enough to be invisible to the naked eye. In this particular river followed a complicated path through the woods, so our target would actually disappear from view in less than a minute. The terrain was such that you couldn't hope to catch up by sprinting after it. Asako and I both knew the layout of this mountain intimately. It would come down to us lying in wait, trying to land the first hit by aiming at a point where the can was likely to flow past. 10 minutes later, I was running through the woods carrying my favorite rifle. Back when my pet dog was alive, I'd run through this mountain every morning. It was basically my backyard. I knew plenty of landmarks in these woods that Asako did not. And of course, she'd basically retired from active duty. I was confident that I'd win. Asako clearly wanted to make me eat my words, but I wasn't about to just let her. I had my pride as a full-fledged agent. Today, I was going to turn the tables and show my master a thing or two. In the first place, I was a little angry at Asako for underestimating me so badly. Did she really think I was going to have trouble sniping a floating can? I'd actually given myself this exact challenge a number of times back in the day on my daily walks with John, and from experience I'd identified a number of ideal locations for sniping. Soon enough, I was lying prone at one of these points, the edge of a cliff, looking down on a part of the river where it grew deeper and slower. The distance was about 800 meters. Peering into my scope, I studied the area through the lines of my reticle. Swaying treetops showed me the wind. Heaving water showed me the river's flow. Mentally calculating the time it would take a bullet to reach my target, I set my sights on the point where I'd expected the can to appear. Alright, I've got this. I couldn't resist a silent chuckle. I'd already convinced myself this was the day I'd finally surpass Asako. All I had to do was wait for the can to float into view. In my experience, I'd usually have about 11 seconds to fire after spotting the target from here, a bit less if rain had fallen the day before. But just as I was bracing myself, expecting the can to enter my field of vision at any moment, I heard that sound. What? It was unmistakably a rifle shot. Specifically, the familiar sound of Asako's M40A1. Where did that come from? Even as the thought was flashing through my mind, I saw something unbelievable through my scope. Ah, the empty beer can floated peacefully into view, indifferent to my panic, and then burst silently apart. I hadn't even got a chance to pull the trigger. All I could do was lie there and watch the broken can sink beneath the water's surface. Jumping hurriedly to my feet, I turned and looked up at the mountain behind me. The cabin was about halfway up the mountain. Another 400 meters or so above it, there was a small clearing. It was the place where Asako had made a grave for John. I'm all the way up there? It wasn't an impossible shot to be sure. Firing distance would increase to 1400 meters, but the higher elevation gave you a longer window to fire. I'd carelessly assumed Asako wouldn't try something like that without the use of her right eye, and it cost me. Pointing my rifle towards the spot where Asako was likely positioned, I looked into the scope. Sure enough, she was standing there, her white teeth gleaming in the sun. Damn it, she's laughing at me. For some reason, I found that utterly frustrating. I'd never really gotten the chance to go through a rebellious phase with my actual parents, so at the time I didn't recognize this feeling for what it was. I responded to Asako's condescending smirk by raising my right hand, thrusting my index finger up into the air. One more round. My message evidently got across. Within my scope, I saw Asako give an emphatic nod and hold her arms up in a circle. We proceeded to repeat the same challenge. The second time around, I was holding my breath to fire when a bullet zipped across my field of vision. Startled, I reflexively looked around the area, and Asako took the opportunity to line up a shot on the can. There wasn't any rule about not interfering with the opposing sniper. In fact, trying to locate and disrupt your opponent is just a common sense method of defense on the battlefield. In the third round, Asako shot a branch off an overhanging tree, just as I was preparing to fire, shifting the course of the can. I hurriedly adjusted my scope as she claimed the target a few seconds before I could. There wasn't any rule against modifying the target's path either. In the end, I challenged Asako 3 times and suffered 3 clear defeats. There wasn't much to do except moan.
うぐじゃねえんだバカ。ちっと実践経験したぐらいでのぼせやがってんじゃねえよ。お前なんざまだまだど下手くそだってこれで分かったか。
Oh, thank you. In a precise sniping contest held under fair and equal conditions, I was confident that Asako wouldn't have beaten me. However, the battlefield was the stage where I'd put my skills to work, and you couldn't expect a fair duel there. Combat was all about disrupting and deceiving your opponent.
かユージ。勝って兜の尾を締めよってな。よく聞くことわざだが、こいつはまさに真理だ。やれる。今日の俺は絶好調だ。そんな風に思っている時に限ってくだらないミスをする。一度ミスをすれば生きては帰れない。次はないんだ。だからこそ勝った時は考えるんだよ。なぜ今日は勝てたのか。どうすればもっと上手に勝てたのか。今日私がやってみせたことは、私が現場で何度も試し、何度も改良を重ねて成功し続けてきた技の一部で、いわゆるこれは極論になっちまうし、変な癖をつけちまわないように、あえてお前には教えなかったが、狙撃ってやつは突き詰めた話、得意技を持っているやつが生き残る。たとえどんな悪条件にあっても当てるのが当たり前。その当たり前の中でもより得意で確実な条件に持ち込む。いや、引きずり込むって方が正しいが、不利な条件の中、わずかでも得意な条件を作り出すところから狙撃ってのは始まってる。勝っている時こそ、乗っている時こそ、勝つための努力を怠るな。
Okay.
これからの人生、お前が見て、聞いて、感じるものすべてが、お前が勝つヒントになる。
Oh, for the ramblings of a drunkard, that sounds surprisingly profound.
お前な、今のお前なら理解できると思って、私は恥ずかしいのを我慢してマジ説教してやってるのに、その態度は何だ？
I know. I'm embarrassed too. By my own arrogance. Thanks, Asako. You've made it very clear that I still have a long way to go.
下を見て安心するな。上を見て悩みながら生きろ。いつまでいてやれるかはわからんが、私がお前の目標でいてやるよ。
You're too cool, Asako. I've fallen for you all over again. I was very lucky to have a goal ahead of me on the path I'd chosen to follow. I'd climbed my way up a flight of stairs, growing with every step. By the time I reached the landing, my goal had moved even higher up the staircase. Seemed like I'd never be able to reach it, and that meant I could chase it forever. As long as I had Asako, I could keep going. On that day, my ego received a much-needed reality check, and I realized once again exactly how huge a presence Asako was in my life. That defeat also made one thing painfully clear. I didn't know how to flexibly adapt to unexpected circumstances in the field. No matter how many tricks or techniques I learned, they weren't going to do me much good unless I could combine and apply them as the situation required. In other words, my fundamental lack of experience had come back to bite me yet again. It was the inescapable conclusion. Ever since I started living with Asako, my inexperience had caused me all sorts of problems. But after following her example and joining the military, I thought I'd close the gap in our practical knowledge. Of course, my crushing defeat proved otherwise, and I was left more than a little ashamed by my previous arrogance. After that day, I asked JB to keep me working constantly. Up until then, she'd been picking out the jobs only I could handle, limiting the scope of my assignments, It made things simpler, given my unusual background and numerous weaknesses. But at the end of the day, that meant I was avoiding any real challenges, sabotaging my own potential for growth. In the words of Kusakabe Asako,
ガキはガキらしく元気に生きろ。経験もなければ想像力もないガキには元気しかない。元気でなければ若者である意味もない。金やら時間やら体力やら、そんな無駄を怖がるのはジジイになってからでも十分だ。
In other words, experience or hardship that might seem pointless when you're young can actually go a long way towards determining your breadth as a person 10 years down the line. It wasn't so different from what Kazuki used to say. Live your life imagining the person you'll be 10 years from now. I nodded and agreed with Asako's words, but it'd probably be another decade before I really understood them. In any case, after that day, I asked JB to assign me any job I can possibly handle, as opposed to the jobs only I can do. I told her I'd do anything, even dog walking or babysitting. I didn't care. She took this a bit more literally than I had expected. Of course, my babysitting stint wasn't exactly your typical part-time job. After the leaders of a Colombian drug smuggling organization were exposed, its accountant was arrested and offered a plea bargain in exchange for testimony. And he accepted, on the condition that his family's safety would be guaranteed. What's more, the man insisted he didn't want to worry his wife, 36, and child, 9. He couldn't be placed under protective custody, and he had to be guarded without their knowledge. Given the circumstances, 8 agents were selected to monitor and protect the family in their current home. As part of that team, I infiltrated the accountant's home in the role of a new employee at the company where he worked, and was tasked mainly with looking after his young daughter. Took my place as a bodyguard easily enough, but the girl in question turned out to be a shockingly nasty little brat. Basically, the kid was just full of herself. She demanded preferential treatment from everyone at all times, and she fully expected that anything she wanted would instantly become hers. The worst part was she didn't even realize how selfish she was being. Her only child status probably had something to do with that. I'd have preferred to lock her up in her room, but unfortunately that wasn't really an option. All too often I found myself accompanying the little lady on her shopping expeditions as a bag boy of sorts. The instant we entered one of her favorite stores, the 9-year-old princess would point her finger at one item after another, demanding this one and this one, till I was about ready to snap. As the trip wore on, I was trudging along behind her carrying countless bags, almost wishing for some kind of trouble to arise, so I'd have an excuse to throw it all aside. When the little lady abruptly stopped, turned around, and said, "You there, my bootlaces seem to have come undone." She didn't even bother to add a "would you please." Of course, from this little lady's point of view, it was only natural that I'd help. It just wasn't clear how exactly she expected me to do that, given that both my hands were full. As I stood there trying to decide how to proceed, she shrugged theatrically and said, "You Japanese really aren't very considerate, are you?" That was the last straw. Not long after, I found myself whining to JB over the phone. I've had it up to here. I've used up the last of my patience resisting the urge to shout, "Tie your own damn shoes, you brat. I can't take this anymore. I'm begging you. Put someone else in for me, please."
なーに？もうギブアップなの？何でもいいから仕事くれって言い出したのはあなたよ。それに女の子は得意。
She's a child, not a woman. And more importantly, I'm allergic to people who decide they're special. Don't even try to put themselves in anyone else's shoes.
世の中なんてそういう人間ばっかりよ。何のための経験なの？朝子の言葉を思い出しなさい。忍耐、努力、工夫。この3つで乗り切れない問題なんてめったにないわ。
Yeah, but seriously, at my wit's end here. I don't know how to deal with children.
あなたを引き取った直後の朝子も同じようなことで悩んでよく私に電話してきたわ。あなたが朝子にしてもらって嬉しかったことをその子にもしてあげればいいのよ。
You tell me to strip her naked and wash her in the bath? I don't think that's gonna work.
電話じゃなかったら殴ってるわよ。そういう冗談はやめなさい。
Wait. I think I get it.
何よ。
I don't know how to deal with her because I'm thinking of her as a child. Alright. All I have to do is pretend she's a slightly undersized lady, right? She already bought herself clothes and a bag, so the next step would be a sappy movie, then a meal in a nice Italian place. Starting to get the picture. When she starts tearing up during the cheesy romance movie, glance over and ask, "Are you crying?" She'll deny it indignantly. That's pretty cute, right? When you get to the restaurant, tease her for being a sloppy eater and wipe her cheek with your napkin. Then add something like, but I guess that's part of your charm, and watch her face go red. Cute, right? Right. As you've gotten through a few after-dinner drinks, she'll inevitably start complaining about her job. Listen quietly, even if you disagree, do not say so. Just nod, make sympathetic noises every once in a while, like, oh, I'm sorry, da 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 da, and wait for her to state the conclusion she's already reached well in advance. Once it finally comes out, along with a deep sigh, I offer her a bit of gentle advice. All you need to do is give her a little hint. Maybe you could approach it in this way instead. After that, her stubbornness will melt right away, leaving her surprisingly sweet and grateful. See, she really is cute, right? In other words, it's the same as with you. Sorry, I think I figured out how to approach this. That's all. Thanks, Julia. You're always there for me when I need you. I really am grateful. Bye. Mind if I call you again if I run into any more trouble? Alrighty. When I finish up this job, I'll bring a souvenir back to Japan for you. Talk to you later. Oh, I will. And that'll be it for the video, guys. I'll see you tomorrow on more of the Labyrinth of Grisaia. How are we going to deal with this brat? I wonder. Take it easy.